In the third week of April 2022, I tried to cut a screw thread for a sword hilt and failed 4 times. This sword and this screw thread. I didn't do it very well, and I desperately want to try again. Not because I feel like I need to master it, but because a threaded tang, this part under the handle, is just such a cool and elegant way of solving the problem, and I wanted to do it justice. While I was repeatedly failing and trying to learn what I was doing wrong, a video was released on YouTube by a 72-year-old British man I'd never heard of. Screw Threads, The Secret Life of Components, a series of guides for makers and designers, number 12, by Tim Hunkin. The runtime was 56 minutes.
My workshop is full of screw threads.
A prophet, a messiah, here to lead me out of my dark path of ignorance into the light. But not really. The video didn't really show me what I was doing wrong, or a better way of doing it. Still, it was informative, well presented, and most of all, Hunkin seemed incredibly passionate about what could be to some a very mundane topic. I found it very relatable and engaging. He teased intriguing projects and art installations in which he'd used these components, materials, or mechanisms. My thread-cutting crusade was temporarily over, and instead I was preoccupied with finding out who this funny little man was and why he was so knowledgeable about screws. Tim Hunkin, born 1950, is an English engineer, cartoonist, author, TV presenter, artist, self-confessed mad scientist, eccentric inventor, and person who's never had a real job. Prolific maker of mechanical clocks, water features, and unique analog arcade machines. In this domain, he's often compared to Rube Goldberg, complex interconnected mechanisms that intertwine to achieve an otherwise relatively simple goal. These works usually have some kind of pronounced and comedic, political or cultural message. Take, for example, his 2014 arcade installation, Divorce. This cabinet game pits 2 players against each other to spin a wheel and press a button as fast as they can to control a character and wrest possession of a house from the other character. If one player is substantially faster, then they can take the house in its entirety. If they are of a similar speed, the house is ripped in two. This is made wholly impressive by being almost entirely mechanical, with little to no computerized or electrical control. I do find this, and many of the messages in his works, to be pretty regressive, and that creates some cognitive dissonance in me between my admiration of his skills and the meaning they try to impart. Having researched him and his creative process, I can fairly easily overcome this. Hunkin's creative process is very skills, materials, and process driven. He'll create divergent lists of interesting mechanisms and useful materials, often salvaged or recycled. He'll then converge on marrying the two under the banner of a joke, thought, or contention he thinks will suit them. Within the design and production of a specific piece, he'll also use divergent and convergent creative problem solving, making many prototypes, possible solutions, then paring them down until he has the best materials and mechanisms to create the effects he wishes to achieve. In an essay he published in 2013 accompanying a Chicago exhibition called Rube Goldberg's Ghost, he comments, "I think initial concepts or ideas are always overrated. My starting points are usually quite simple. The fun and the skills are in the making." He also states, "Cartoons generally aren't subtle. It's important that everyone understands the joke. In the same way my machines aren't subtle. The arcade depends on everyone enjoying them. Goldberg's cartoons and my machines are in the tradition of popular art, which is separate from fine art." Hunkin created Divorce because he had observed the conflicting jerking motions created by some mechanisms and wanted to find a way to highlight this, finding a character in the opposing forces between hinges and screw threads and anthropomorphizing it, making version after version with different materials and slightly different mechanisms until he had achieved the motion he desired and done the mechanisms justice. Hunkin's creative process also aligns well with cognitive theories of creativity. One of the key tenets of cognitive theories of creativity is the idea that creativity is a result of the interaction between the individual, the domain, and the environment. Hunkin draws from his years of experience observing machines and engineering, creates a goal to work towards, constrains himself with the materials and components he has available or wants to demonstrate, and the artwork is just a product of this addition. Personally, I often feel somewhat uncomfortable when someone refers to me as an artist or a creative. While I obviously engage in creative endeavors, create things, and contribute to art, I feel more like a fabricator or a maker. The art or creativity comes in what I try to make things from, with, or for. In this respect, I feel renewed and inspired by Hunkin. His engineered and mechanical approach to art feels more related to me than the more abstracted and esoteric mentalities I've experienced in fine art and theatrical university courses. In the wake of discovering him, I found myself relishing in the process of planning, prototyping, and failing, combing through old boxes of mechanical parts and reading industrial supply catalogs for inspiration. I'm very glad I screwed up that thread cutting, because it led the YouTube algorithm to deliver me an example of a maker whose creative process is very similar to my own, and who gives me hope that I too could never have a real job but just make stupid, overly complicated, and largely meaningless objects.